Good evening. I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to you all here, both in the hall and those joining us online on our live stream, to the 53rd Tillotson Lecture. The Tillotson Lectures have drawn eminent speakers, including Sir Ian McKellen, Lord Coe, Sir Philip Craven, to talk on a wide variety of topics. Last year we welcomed Dr. Mobeen Qureshi, an orthopaedic trauma surgeon and star of the TV series Race Across the World. This year's speaker, David Williams, is also no stranger to the TV screens, having been involved in TV racing, being interviewed live today on Sky News, I believe. And also, according to his file, and I'm not sure whether this is true, having spoken to him today, apparently he was also a contestant on 15 to 1 back in 1999. Those young people in the audience, 15 to 1 was a very, very serious quiz competition, probably second only to Mastermind. Now, I've no idea how he did in this competition. There is no evidence of him taking part in this competition, but it's in his file. He wrote it, which might also explain some of the reasons why it's in his file, but there's no record of how he did. So how did you get on 15 to 1?
I have no memory.
No memory, so clearly not well. His school file, however, and I know David was worried about what it might contain, is actually a delight to read. It shows a talented sportsman, a gifted speaker, and a serious academic. I'm not sure you should laugh at your own son being described as a serious academic, but that says everything, I think. He won the Hanbury Prize for Academic Excellence. Apparently, and this is also disputed, he won a gold medal in the British Biology Olympiad. He won the Frank Brown Prize twice. And he was also school captain, and he was also captain of Wigan House. And also I believe that David is the only other person, other than myself, ever to deliver an assembly on Brighton and Hove Albion Football Club. Okay, so, and that's how I know that he is a proper football fan. So, yeah, I won't say too much more about football because I've got a feeling that he might mention this during his speech tonight. But when it was announced that he was going to do tonight's Tillotson Lecture, former headmaster, Mr. Wright, emailed me to say how fondly he remembered David and his excellent year as school captain. He remembers David's smile and easy charm, a quality also easily evidenced in his reports by the fact in a year in biology where he'd blatantly done no work whatsoever, he still somehow managed to convince Dr. Mullins to give him a 1 for effort. Mr. Wright also shared his recollections of that ISFA final at Craven Cottage. He remembered that the final was refereed by David Ellery, who went on to become one of the finest referees in the country. David Ellery wrote to Mr. Wright after to commend the whole Bolton School team on their play, skill, attitude and behaviour when faced with, apparently, almost adult competition. There was, I believe, a suggestion or possibly an excuse that Lancing had fielded a significantly older side, but I wasn't there, and that's what apparently the excuse is. So I know that David has done a lot since leaving school, however, and I know there's a lot to look forward to in his lecture, and I'd now like to hand over to Ollie Hatton, Vice Captain of School, to properly introduce this year's speaker.
Good evening. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you all to today's Tillotson Lecture, a tradition that has brought outstanding speakers to Bolton School for more than half a century. Tonight we continue that legacy with a guest whose journey, since leaving this very building, embodies curiosity, resilience, humour and character, all qualities that reflect the best of our school community. Our speaker, Mr. David Williams, is an old Boltonian whose time here began in the early 1990s. He threw himself into school life with enthusiasm, as a committed sportsman, being a member of our successful football team, and ultimately as school captain. But beyond the trophies and titles, David's years at Bolton School shaped something deeper, a lifelong appreciation for friendship, for graft, and for the lessons learned outside of school as much as inside it. After leaving Bolton School, David went on to read geography at St Edmund Hall, Oxford, before embarking on a career that has been anything but predictable. He has worked across several industries, with each chapter of his career being marked by the ability to build relationships and to find humour in even the most challenging of circumstances. Today he serves as the Director of Corporate Affairs and Investor Relations at the Rank Group, where he works at the intersection of businesses, public policy and communication. What stands out most about David and why he is the ideal Tillotson lecturer is not simply his professional success, but the perspective he has gained along the way. His belief that setbacks shape us more than victories, that character matters more than job titles, and that friendships and values formed here at Bolton School endure long after we leave this building. David returns not just as a former pupil, but as a reminder of what Bolton School instills. Confidence without arrogance, ambition without entitlement, and the understanding that life rarely moves in straight lines. His story is a testament to embracing challenge, facing uncertainty, and making the most of opportunities that shape us. It is an honour to welcome David back to the school and to invite you to listen to someone whose journey from these corridors to the wider world offers both insight and inspiration. Please join me in warmly welcoming tonight's Tillotson lecturer, Mr. David Williams.
Thank you, Ollie. Thank you, Mr. Ford. I'm not sure I recognised everything in there, not least the 15 to 1. Perhaps I was giving Mr. Wright a tip. Anyway, thank you everyone for coming, especially those of you whom are clearly here under duress. Apologies to those of you who've already seen my lecture on the OBR website. I'm going to try and get you out of here within an hour, not only because I've got a breakfast meeting at 8 o'clock in London, but because, with respect, I remember very little about Tillotson lectures other than old men rambled on about themselves and didn't talk about football. I might touch on football. Let's see how we go. I was reminded that the first Marcus Tillotson lecture in 1971 was on the subject of Parliament today. And I thought about coming full circle and having a crack at that this evening, but Mr. Ford advised me that one of the very few stipulations of the Tillotson lecture was to be apolitical. And anyway, I think I've perhaps dodged a bullet. So when I actually do think back to the very few recollections of the Tillotson lectures that I do have, I remember two things vividly. Firstly, Michael Portillo's hair. Now, Michael Portillo was a big beast back in the mid-1990s. I think he was Secretary of State for Defence. Now, a cabinet minister coming to Bolton made the front page of the Evening News, of course. And even in the days before HD imagery, his glossy hair, standing at this lectern, his glossy hair looked magnificent. And unlike mine, I think it was all his. And secondly, and best of all, was Professor Derek Pragg. And I'm reminded in our little programmes that this was in 1997. Now, he spoke on the subject of the European Parliament. So much for no politics, Mr. Ford. Anyway, we all filed in and he droned on and we sat down there and dozed off and we didn't have phones to check and all of that. And in our year, we had a guy called Nick Bennett, Benno. Now, Benno was a great mate then and he remains a great mate to this day. So we're all sitting down there and Benno's getting a bit antsy in his chair and we don't quite know why. And it's only as the Q&A started that we realised that Benno's dad was in the audience. Now, as schoolboys, you have crosses to bear, but there is not much worse than your parents coming to a lecture voluntarily that you have been forced to attend and then getting into an argument with the lecturer. But that is exactly what Benno's dad did, and we loved it. We absolutely pounced. We were like hyenas. Maybe boys are a little less cruel now, but we gave poor Benno pelters back then, and we still do. Anyway, I got the email a little earlier this year to give the Tillotson lecture. I thought it was a spoof. You've had, I think Mr. Ford mentioned it, you've had some megastars up here, Lord Coe, Sebastian Coe and the like. You've had some ropey ones as well. Ralph Little. I was with Ralph. He couldn't even get in the second 11, and he's gone on to play in those football charity games at Wembley, and he snogged Kylie Minogue. But last month, I promised I'd give Ralph a name check to help his faltering acting career. I checked in with my cousin Adam Siddall here on the front row, who knows all about school. He sits on the Old Boltonians Association Committee. He is positively a school grandee. Adam helpfully suggested that they'd invited the wrong brother. Now, my older brother is a classical musician. He has his own Wikipedia page. He sang with Take That. He would have been great this evening. But I said yes, and I needed to hit on a theme. And it prompted me to take a look at this place, this school, this building, the teachers, and all the things that go to create a school. The uniform, the rituals, the rhythms, and of course the motto, Mutare vel timere sperno. I very nearly did that in Mr. Rigby's accent, but he's here this evening, and I adore him, so I've resisted. Now, back in the 1990s, I don't know if it's still the case, everyone had to do Latin when they came to school. I quite liked Latin, so I stuck with it. I stuck with the famous Colin Edmondson vocab test, quam celerime, every week, quickly as possible. But one bit of Latin that baffled me was this school motto that we have. What does it mean? Mutare vel timere sperno. Well, it means I spurn to change or to fear. Now, I don't know what that means in English, let alone Latin. I spurn to change or to fear. Not only does it not make immediate sense, it kind of feels a bit of a dud, really. You know, everyone else gets really good Latin mottos, and we get this meaningless, curious, slightly depressing one. So I had a moment of inspiration. I thought, I know what, I'll ask Dr. Holland. Now, Dr. Holland never taught me Latin. He was my form tutor in the sixth form. He was the first guy I ever met who wore cufflinks and cutaway collars and Windsor knots and tailored suits. And I reckoned back then in the 1990s, he was probably in his mid to late 50s. And I saw him earlier today, and I think he's still in his mid to late 50s. But he gave me his take on spurning fear and change, and his interpretation, which suddenly makes a lot more sense, is to look at change in tandem with fear. In other words, to avoid being inconstant or timid. So we are effectively reminded with our motto of the need to be courageous and constant, not to abandon or to forsake those things that matter and always ought to matter. That flighty sense of inconstancy is the change that we must forsake or spurn. The motto effectively calls us to put down roots. It's not telling us not to be scared from time to time. That would be absurd, wouldn't it? And I'll share some of those times when I've been petrified. But it is instead warning us not to give up at the first sign of some bumps appearing in our road. We can change too easily. We can seek to have everything, and in the end, we stand for nothing. And whilst this helps with the motto itself, I've been thinking in recent days about how we square away that advice with school and the lessons learned here. Not the lessons in the classroom, Andy Compton telling us that gley means waterlogged soil, or Caspar Joseph always chalking up Sicily on a map of Europe, telling us it was the football at the bottom of Italy's boot, or Mr. Townsend telling us not to mistake the oral French exam for the oral. The lessons, the life lessons, were all learned outside the classroom, with brilliant schoolmates in the common room, on the football field, and in these alcoves that were once meant for private study in free periods. Moreover, it got me thinking about how enforced and disruptive change and visceral fear, both appropriately processed, have underpinned the very best lessons that we can ever learn, and how, for me, they've directly impacted the passage of my career to date. So this is where my lecture, such as it is, begins. So let's start with fear. And closely related to fear, in my experience, is the idea of rejection. And I thought I might pursue this theme of rejection for a moment, as it rather explains why I'm here. I mentioned a few moments ago that my older brother was a musician. He had a prodigious talent as a kid, and possibly against my parents' instincts, they allowed him to go for a place at Cheetham School of Music in Manchester, and he didn't get in. I think Mum still has that rejection letter. Now, my mum's best friend, my Auntie Julie Steele, well known to David Lloyd's staff past and present, Auntie Julie suggested that he apply for a music scholarship at Bolton School. Now, my mum, she's here, behaving, she knew Bolton School well. My grandparents, Reg and Margaret Siddall, had moved to Ducie Avenue to be closer to school when Mum's two brothers came here, including my Uncle Peter, here on the front row, came here in the 1960s. Ducie Avenue, by the way, is where Mr. Whitton and Mr. Joseph used to go to smoke after they'd burnt down the history staff room in the early 1990s. Now, my father, from working class North Wales, wasn't entirely on board with the prospect of private education, and when he saw the school fees, I think they were about £4,000 a year, can you believe that, parents? He gulped, but Mark came here in the late 80s, he flourished, so they had to give me a chance, and unfortunately for them, I passed, double fees for mum and dad, all born out of rejection from Cheatham's. Rejection invariably opens new doors. It hurts, but it works. And as with so many other things that hurt, we can either put some sugar or lipstick on it and pretend it's not what it is, or we can face it down. And that's the thing to do when you're knocked back or rejected or overlooked or change is forced upon you. Be agile, spot the gap, and take it. A phrase that I have heard increasingly and somewhat depressingly in recent years is stay in your lane. Now, to the boys here, at this stage in your lives, do not do anything of the sort. Explore what is out there and continually reassess what is right for you. Are you being the best you can be, or are you starting to idle? Anyway, I arrived here in 1992, and suddenly you're thrown in with hundreds of other boys. You're no longer top of the class, like you were in your cosy Church of England school in Harwood. You are in the pack. And worse still, everyone from Park Road knows what they're doing. They seem to know the drill, and nobody looked out for me. My cousins were too busy playing cricket. My brother was too busy milking that music scholarship for all it was worth. So you're on your own, and you have a choice when you come here. You have a choice. As you go through school, you can blend in, you can go with the flow, you can stay in the pack, or you can stand out. And at a lecture like this, you're expecting me to tell you that life's all about standing out and getting noticed and forging your own path. But I didn't do that. I was actually too scared. When I stood out, it was for what I felt at the time were the wrong reasons. I wore a cross on my lapel, a sign of my faith. I had spots. I sang in choir. My brother played this organ behind me permanently with his head tilted on one side. Now, for Ben Cowgill, who is here tonight, great mate of mine, who spent his entire 7 years here kissing girls, that is a lot of red flags. But as the years went by, I became more comfortable. I had a few setbacks. I got caught playing kabaddi on B Corridor and the like, but it helped that I was part of a football team that was all-conquering. I was skinny, believe it or not. I was slower than a slug. I had a wonky chin, but I was still in that football team, and nobody could touch us. In our first 3 years, we played 65 and we won 65. And then we drew against Repton on the bottom level, dodgy ref, Rigby. Now, drawing a football match is hardly a rejection, but that is how it felt, that sense of failure, that sense that suddenly you're vulnerable, having never been vulnerable before. You see, you do not remember the victories at Bolton School. Winning seems to come easily. You have all won your place here. You are already successful young men. But fear and failure can ferment if you are not careful. And so it was with me. Defeats, that is what stick. It is the defeats far more than the victories that stick in the memory. But they are vital. And ultimately they can be life-enhancing. And so it continued. I've whittled this down to half a page. I started at 10 pages. Most famously, on the 11th of March, 1997, I was in my 5th year, which I think is year 11 in New Money, and we made the independent schools final at Craven Cottage. The school ferried dozens of buses down to London with teachers and boys who were thrilled to have the day off. I was 16. It was as good as it got. Andy Coleman, God rest his soul, put us 1-0 up. Winning at half-time, we were less than an hour away from being the first 11 to win the most prestigious cup in schools football, but we lost, and we shouldn't have lost. We made the final again the next year, my lower sixth. We were beaten by the better team that night. That didn't hurt quite so badly. And we never made the final again. And with school, as with life, you don't get to go round again. And Craven Cottage left a bruise that I still wince at, more so now with a smile, 28 years later. And we'll have a look at what we do with those bruises that we are left with. Now, at the end of my lower sixth, I managed to see off a ferocious campaign by the girls div Hearthrobby and Sawbridge for the school captaincy. Life was breezy. I stood at this lectern, nobbing around with my white carnation. And then, the night before my A-level results, my granddad died. And I turned up at school the next day, and I hadn't got my grades for Oxford. I'd got a B in geography. I'd failed. And my world was collapsing around me. That's how it felt. You see, Bolton School is not an environment in which failing is part of the curriculum. We're not used to it. And in many ways, that's a good thing, right? But you very quickly learn when you leave this place that coming up short is just what happens in life. Now, Mr. Wright pulled a few strings and they let me into Oxford, not because I had any particular academic merit, but because I think, as the blurb in this little programme suggests, that's just what football-playing school captain geographers did back in the 90s. They went to Teddy Hall, and frankly, academically, at Oxford, I was a bit of a dud. Thank you for suggesting I wasn't, but I was. Not bad at football, good at college bar crawls, but academically, a bit Wigan athletic. But 3 years later, I emerged with a degree, but not a clue what I wanted to do with my life. Mum and Dad wanted me off the books, fair enough. And back then, it was all about jobs. What career did you want? Management consultant, law conversion, journalist. Find a job is what we were told. And I look back at that now in the context of my current role, and I realize that the labeling of jobs with obvious exceptions, teacher, doctor, lawyer, accountant, is already obsolete. I was at the dentist a couple of weeks ago, and I had to fill out one of those forms, sort of name, address, email, date of birth, and then occupation. And I had a blank. Occupation. What is that? Is that your career? Well, I've made a career, such as it is, out of talking for a living and telling stories. Well, I couldn't put that. Is it a function? Public relations, public affairs, lobbying? That didn't sound right. Is it my job title? Director of Corporate Affairs and Investor Relations. Box wasn't big enough. Is it my industry? Gambling. Gulp. Can't put that. I'd get cancelled. They'd drill my teeth out without anaesthetic if they knew that. Is it your company? Rank Group. Rank. Well, they make films, don't they, where a man hits a gong at the beginning. So the point is this. You mustn't get hung up thinking about jobs or job titles. Very few of you will have jobs for life. Fewer still will have jobs that define you. And unless you do something brilliant, like saving lives on an operating table, thank God for that. I have recruited lots of people throughout my career. Rarely do I care what their previous job was or is, nor, if I am honest, do I pay too much attention to their degree grades. I am not telling you to quit on your studies. I wouldn't get out alive if I were to say that, and quite right. If you're learning, learn for the sake of learning rather than the sake of grades. What matters more than grades and jobs to an extent, but only to an extent, are skills. But skills increasingly can become commodities. It used to be a thing that if you were good with technology, that was a precious skill. If we're not already there, that is as basic a requirement now as reading and writing. The differentiators change through time. AI is no longer on the horizon. It's all around us, and we're subjected to a blizzard of not knowing what is and what is not real. I'm determined not to lecture on AI. Everyone else in the world is doing that. But I could have got ChatGPT to write this in a heartbeat. My mum wouldn't have known. She's still amazed there's 5 channels on a TV. And you're probably wishing that I had turned to ChatGPT, but I didn't. I promise I didn't. The point is, skills and tactics will not see you through the biggest and most rapid revolution that just so happens to be underway in our lifetimes. Bigger and faster, much faster than the Industrial Revolution, the Enlightenment era, whatever else. The technological revolution has already dwarfed it. This, here, my phone, is 30,000 times more powerful than the first computer that I sat at on C Corridor in my sixth form. And a decade from now, no more than a decade from now, at the 63rd Tillotson lecture, the speaker here will scoff at the idea that once we carried plastic devices around in our pockets. Change. Nothing is more certain than change. So to Dr. Holland's point, how can we be constant and steadfast in the midst of such change? Should we not be riddled with fear? There'll be no jobs, right? I was told last month that my role will be better performed by AI within 18 months to 2 years. And maybe that is right. It probably already is. We will all be required to change. Staying in our lanes will not help us a jot. So it's not about skills and jobs. What is it about? How can we navigate the fears and the prospect of change that feature in our school motto? And the answer is character. And what do I mean by character? Character is not personality. Nowadays, I spend more time than most people would be prepared to endure with elected parliamentarians, politicians. Now, we can all call to mind politicians in this country and beyond with big personalities. Not all of them, some are as dull as toast. Some are spectacularly unimpressive. But their personalities can quite quickly be recognized. And yet they have an inconstancy. Their behaviors are the changes that our motto quite rightly warns us against. But you cannot switch on and switch off your character. Sure, you can develop it, and nothing is more important as we navigate life. Character matters, and it will matter until the end of time. Personality is how you behave most days, the ordinary days, when things are ticking along. Character is how you behave on the tough days, when you lose, when you're rejected, when you face bereavement. Now, my advice to the young men in this room is to take the opportunities to reveal your character, your values. They can stem from having a great family or a steadfast faith. Your character will never betray you. Your personality sometimes will. And it's when you're down on your luck that your character reveals itself. And that's how and when and what folk, your friends, will remember you for. Not the good times. Enjoy the good times, but you will learn very little from them. Your character will reward you with rich friendships and relationships. And just as you develop and enrich your character, be on the lookout for those people who are on the same journey as you, and hitch yourself to them. You will not do that on devices. You will need to interact with people directly, and you should relish that, because real experiences, as we go through this rapid technological revolution, real experiences will prevail. I'm reminded of the phrase, which rather reassured me when I was scribbling this script, that nobody remembers what you say, but they will remember how you made them feel. And that is true of assemblies in this great hall, and it speaks to the character of a gentleman to whom I owe an enormous debt of gratitude, not yet repaid, and that is Alan Wright, my headmaster. Mr. Wright was an inspirational man, but I remember nothing that he said from this lectern other than, for one term, repeated references to Nebuchadnezzar, and once in third year, him absolutely monstering the whole of third year for having pylons in the classrooms at every opportunity. But what I felt was authority and warmth and integrity, and here's the point, constancy. Solid, unchanging foundations, while so much change for better and for worse here in this school. And when I throw those memories and lessons forward to my working life, I know with certainty that I do not want to work with guys who have had it served up to them with a lifetime of half-volleys. Instead, I want to see evidence of emotional bruises and the scars and what it has done to the character. You've got to wear those scars and bruises with suitable pride. The character to embrace change, to face down fear and convert it into something more wholesome. Interviewing people for a job is simple. All I do is ask myself, do I want this guy in the trenches with me? Or will he or she fold like a deck chair when it starts to get a bit bumpy? Your character will show up when your personality checks out. Now, for reasons I can't quite follow, Mr. Ford has asked me to spend a little bit of time telling you about my life post my formal education. So I got my degree, hadn't the first idea what job I wanted, so I went travelling. A gap year. Planned to go with my cousin, but he bailed on me, something about cricket, I think. So off I went with my rucksack, Sony Walkman, cassettes of love songs, and not long into my gap year, I flew from Singapore to Bali. I checked into my hotel just off the main road in Kuta. I dumped down my rucksack. I went to speak to the bloke in reception, and I asked him where to go for a drink. I was absolutely gasping. I am now, but anyway. He said, walk all the way down to the end of that road, and he pointed, and he said, at the end of that road, it depends what you want. If you want a big night, turn right. You'll go to the Sari Club and Paddy's Bar, full of Australians, cocktails galore, full-on party. If you want a quieter night, turn left, go to the Hard Rock Cafe. Nice burger, you'll get a pint of lager. So I set off and I got to the end of the road and I paused and I turned left. I'd have a quiet one. Tomorrow night I'd turn right. I'd have a big one tomorrow. An hour or so later, there was an explosion. Moments later, there was another explosion. Terrorists from a cell linked to 9/11 had detonated 2 bombs. One in Paddy's Bar and one in the Sari Club. 202 people were killed that night. People talk about forks in the road, and that means something very real for me. That was the 12th of October, 2002, and I have been on borrowed time ever since. There are moments that happen in your life that change how you think forever. And that was one such moment. And I tried to make a promise to myself to make every post thereafter a winning post, to embrace change, to remind yourself that you are not in control of everything, and to stand up tall when you are scared. I came home a few months later. I needed a job. I wanted a graduate role at Gallagher Tobacco because you got a Vauxhall Vectra with that job, but I didn't get an interview. I applied for a job at Chancellors, the estate agency. They said I was the wrong fit. Orange Telecommunications, you got a Nokia with Nokia 3310, didn't even get an interview. And I ended up working in pharmaceutical market research near Macclesfield. And to this day, I have no idea why or how, but I did. And I couldn't shake off, in the short number of months that I was there, this sense that I was not making every post a winning post. At university, I'd started to go racing. My great mate, Paul Wheatcroft, he's here tonight. I spotted him on the way in. Wheaty and I would exchange letters about races we'd watched. I still have those letters. Racing became my thing. So I wrote to a load of people in racing, asking them for a job, and most of them ignored me, but one guy didn't, a guy called Brough Scott. Now, Brough is still on TV, ITV Racing. He's older than God, but back then he told me to meet him in Wimbledon. So I went down to see him, and he gave me an analogy that has stuck with me ever since. He told me that the bus you want will never stop for you. And the worst thing to do with your life is to stand and wait at the bus stop. The first thing you've got to learn is to time your run. Get jogging, quicken to a sprint, and then leap on. And when you get onto that bus, hold on at the back. It's one of those old-fashioned buses, right? There is no room for you. And bit by bit, as the bus just keeps motoring on, folk will fall off or get pushed off, or they will choose to get off, but the bus will never stop. And as folk get off, people on the bus move around and you'll find your seat. And after a while, you've got a seat and then a better seat and so on. And I wanted to catch the racing bus. So I applied for another graduate scheme at Ladbrokes, and foolishly they said yes. Now, at Ladbrokes, I expected to stay for something between 14 days and 14 weeks, but I stayed for 14 years. And my role changed enormously on that time, but I managed to spend most of my weekends on race courses. I thought I'd died and gone to heaven. But there were some bumps in the road. I was interviewed once on Channel 4, and I got the details of something I ought to have known about, spectacularly wrong. And I knew, as I did it, that I'd screwed up. A few people messaged me to tell me I'd screwed up. And I tried to patch it up, and I gave one of the customers who was asking me some follow-up questions, I gave him my phone number. That night, he posted it on a forum, and the next day, I woke up to just over 400 missed calls from some very, very angry people, and it ended up costing my company fortunes. On another occasion, I was questioned by the Detective Chief Inspector in charge of Operation Elvedon. Now, for those who remember, that was the police investigation into phone hacking. They didn't tell me why they wanted to speak with me, just that I'd crossed their radar whilst, wait for it, they'd been using surveillance techniques on journalists to look at some of my messages, all right? Anyway, they casually told me that I wasn't yet under arrest. I was never arrested, as it happens. Got to get that in there. I got an apology some weeks later from the Met Police. Was I crippled with fear at the time? Yes. Did I want to change? Yes. I was desperate for the quiet life. But really, that is not my character, and that was not the change for me. About 7 or so years ago, I was approached to lead the public affairs function at Rank. Now, apart from not knowing what public affairs was or what Rank was, I was keen, so I joined. Nowadays, I spend less time on Sky Sports News than I used to, much more time studying impact assessments of budgets. Might have a busy few days, but anyway, I love it. It exhausts me, and although my wonderful wife will tell me that I whinge, I guess that's also my character. Sometimes it's okay to have something to whinge about. And I work in an industry that, I get it, right? Trust me, I get it, attracts heated opinion. Some of it is fair, some of it is understandably emotive and born out of painful lived experience, and some of it is plain inaccurate. As long as there is respect, I will always engage with that discussion. And I interact with, and I engage with some really dodgy sorts. Not just politicians, although they're often the worst. In your life, you will have to rub along with folk you cannot abide. Which brings me to my next piece of advice, which is to learn how to compartmentalize. People do not need to be your friends. Do not waste time with people who do not deserve you. I'm not doubling as a divorce lawyer here, by the way. Although Benno, who I mentioned earlier, is the best in the country. Anyway, by the way. It's more so about folk you will meet in your working lives. You will make terrific friends as you leave this place. I'll come back to this place. But as you leave this place, you'll make terrific friends. But when you have concluded that people are purposefully slowing you up and obfuscating and muddying your waters, do not accommodate them. And you can do that without being rude. And remember, when your bus might be on its way, get moving. Get moving. It will not stop for you. And you will never get on if you have ground to a halt or you're in with the wrong crowd. In that regard, you boys here are amongst the fittest people in the country. You've got the best trainers on, but you have still got to run. You have still got to run for that bus. It will not come and collect you. Nobody owes you anything. With your privilege, and I use that word carefully because you are privileged in the best sense of the word rather than the ugliest. With privilege comes greater responsibility. Do not succumb to the bigotry of lower expectations, because if you do, from this privileged seat in this hall, you betray those people in your world, your teachers, your parents especially, who have done so much and often sacrificed so much to help you get here. So do not strive away from trying to be excellent, not the best, just your best. Do not give way to those people who sneer about places like Bolton School. Too often, society feels queasy when it comes to expecting a lot from people like you, and that is rubbish. Life is hard, right? And it can be grossly unfair. But your character will ensure that you prevail. The key tenets of character are curiosity, courage, integrity, and respect. And Bolton School has always delivered on those 4 cornerstones. And never abandon your friends. In this room are some of my very best friends, men whom I would choose to have in the trenches with me, all of whom, at times, have had to show their character and have emerged better and stronger for it, because Bolton School is brilliant in that regard. When I went to uni, and in every environment since then, I've always felt that the friendships forged on the levels, on Dobby Road Quad, in the Undercroft, even in detention with Kabaddi, they are the best friendships there can be. So take your work seriously, boys. Take your privilege and your responsibility seriously, but do not take yourself too seriously. More than anything else, take the friendships you are making here on Chorley New Road incredibly seriously. Neglect those friendships and everything unravels. And when you come to leave this school, don't worry. I had this discussion with one of the boys earlier. Do not worry if you're not sure what to do. Don't panic if you're not sure yet what the correct bus looks like. Just know that by having been here and having put your bit in, you are able to run. Don't be crippled with fear. You will find your bus. And that allows me to make one penultimate point, rabbiting on a bit here, if I may. When you leave this school, you become part of something bigger, which is the Old Boltonians Association for all old boys. The current president is Barry Nightingale. The fellow who succeeds him isn't all that much, but Barry is hot on mentoring. Boys, find yourself a mentor. Go and find yourself a mentor. Bang on doors and do not take no for an answer. No, I will not help you is not good enough. Explain to who says it to you that that is not good enough, and that you'll wait and you'll knock again until they say yes. And give back when your time comes. Give back through the Old Bolts Association. Give back of your time. For those of you who can afford it, give back your money. I sound like Bob Geldof now. Right, finally, you'll be pleased to hear. When I think of my own journey to this school, through this school, and in the years since, I think of my mum and dad and the sacrifices that they made. My dad was my hero. He'd have been here tonight, front row, probably a bit tipsy because there was free wine in the head study beforehand, but he'd have been over the moon to see so many of my mates here and Mr. Rigby, and he'd have somehow found a way for them to reopen the line of Vienna for one night, I have no doubt. Mum and Dad sacrificed all of the nice things so that I could come to Bolton School. All the mistakes that I have subsequently made, all the times I've taken myself too seriously, all the missteps I've stumbled around, they are all on me, and I own them. And whilst it's not tradition to end a Tillotson lecture in this way, there is one change I can get on board with, and that's to tell my mum, in just about as public a forum as I can find, that I owe everything that is good to her and to my dad, and that I love them both very much. Thank you.
That's actually quite a difficult line to follow on from, because I don't really know how to address this. But I do know two things from there. That it's great that we hear about character, a theme that I've spoken about many times on this stage myself, and the importance of character. And I also know that there's a lot of boys here who will be Googling what kabaddi is. And when you find out, we're not playing it, just to be very clear. We have some time for some questions, and I know David is keen to answer any questions. Do we have any questions for David in the audience? We have some microphones. Just put your hand up, okay, if you'd like to ask David a question. We have on both sides.
Hi. Do you have any regrets about your school life?
Sorry, say that again. Do I?
Do you have any regrets about your school life?
Do I have any regrets? Yeah, about school life, absolutely. 11th of March 1997, Craig Jolly, who was in the back three, went walkabout when Lancing were on the front foot. I failed to cover. Wilrum scored, Rick Sellers got sniped, we lost 2-1. I should have covered. Absolutely. That was big. I mean, that's not just my biggest regret from school, that is probably my biggest regret in life. Terrible mistake, but Jolly used to be so reliable.
What other values do you wish that you gained before leaving school?
Sorry, I'm looking for where the question came from there. Oh, there we go. Say that again, sorry.
What other values do you wish you gained before leaving school?
The values. What the values I wish I'd gained? What are the values that I wish I'd gained from school? Crikey. That I didn't gain.
What other values do you wish that you did gain?
That I did gain?
Before leaving school, yes.
Oh, right. Resilience. If I kind of think of one thing, it's resilience. But the whole point is, when you are here as pupils, if you were to sort of set yourselves as boys against the aggregate of all of the other people of your age, more goes right for you guys on aggregate than for other people. And you deserve that, and you should never apologize for that. That was kind of the bit I was getting to when I was talking about, don't allow people to sneer at your education here. You should be proud about it without being pompous about it. But the key thing is, when things go against you, it's rare on aggregate. Some of you will have an awful lot of bad luck, I have no doubt. But it's rare, and because it's rare, you need to know how to process it. And that comes from resilience and you need your North Star. You need to establish what is your North Star, what are the things that you stand for. And for me, two of the things that I didn't really touch on, but I probably can touch on here, are faith, having a strong faith, but also having a terrific family unit, such that when you wobble, you can be brought back. If you can get things like that right, you're on the right lines. Sorry if that didn't answer your question. I kind of feel it didn't answer your question, but
Thank you.
It took me a long time to get to it, but there we go. That's my fault.
Two questions down here and one on that side.
So, how was your life at Oxford, and did you always know that you were going to go there?
Oxford?
Yeah.
Oh, God, no. No, God, no. Look, my brother went to Cambridge, and so that was out of the question. Look, I mean, when you're here, you're probably far more refined than I ever was. You don't really think about, God, I really want to go to Oxford. You just want to play football, right? You just want to play football. That's all you want to do. And effectively, back then, I think somebody suggested that I ought to go to Teddy Hall at Oxford, because actually it was the easiest college to get into. And a few of my predecessors who had been school captain and played football and read geography had gone, and they hadn't disgraced themselves. Curiously, nobody went after me. But no, I never. I mean, I never sort of held out any of those dreams. And that is my kind of point about learning. I think far too often we kind of think, what if I do this? What will it mean for me in terms of what happens next? And you're not entirely in control of that. So kind of be in the moment now. So if the lesson is now, don't think, well, I'll miss that one, but I'll do that one because actually in 3 years' time, there's more value in this one than in that one. Just learn for the sake of learning and just see where it takes you.
Do you have any memorable experiences from Oxford that you haven't mentioned?
Yes. Should we have the next question? No, I certainly do, but she's asked me not to talk about them. So, no, look, I mean, when I use that phrase, make every post a winning post, you know, the older you get, I sound like an old man now. You know, when I was here, it felt like it lasted forever. And you look back and 7 years is the blink of an eye. And university was whatever less than a blink of an eye is. And you've just got to immerse yourself in this sort of here and now and not... it sounds kind of patronizing and glib to say, don't worry too much about the future. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying if you get it right now and you enjoy it for now, you may have the opportunity to look back with great fondness. But no, I've got as many wonderful memories about my time at university as I do at school, but they're perhaps for a different forum. We're being filmed.
Thank you for sharing your amazing experiences with us, Mr. Williams. What have been the most rewarding and challenging aspects of your professional career as Head of Investor Relations at Rank Group?
I think my most challenging achievement as Head of Investor Relations at the Rank Group might be in the next 24 to 48 hours, actually. Apolitical. I am enormously lucky. I think if you can find a job where you get to work with people who will challenge you all the time, and by that, it doesn't mean sort of lively conversations, but actually interrogate you, and you can interrogate them, and you don't have to agree, but you can sort of respectfully argue it out. That is why I don't know if my wife's watching it. She's probably putting the kids to bed, right? But when she comes back to watch this, she will be screaming at this bit, because I'm about to say that is why I love what I do, because of that constant change and challenge. She would say there is no evidence when I get home at the end of a working day that I love what I do. But I think that's just called being old and married. God, loads of questions.
What is your biggest achievement that you gained at school?
Oh, geez. Look, I'm not going to... I remember my cousin Adam is here, and I remember Adam and I were sitting in that alcove there on the 2nd of April, 1998. I was in my lower sixth, he was in his upper sixth. And we had two sergeants, and one of them appeared at the back of the door and walked down, and we thought we were in for a monstering, because we just generally thought we were always in for a monstering. And Ad said, oh, sergeants will be collecting you and taking you because you're about to be made head boy. And I thought he was talking in Braille. Nonsense to me. But he was right. And I remember that day proudly. And I mentioned earlier my gran and granddad, and they used to live not far from here. And it was the last day of spring term, 2nd of April, 1998. I'm a bit of a Rain Man with dates. And I went to see my granddad, and he gave me a £20 note. Now, I hadn't seen many of those. I actually hadn't seen many of them. And I just remember having sort of an enormous sense of pride. I then went on to bugger it all up in my final year, as some of the monitors who are here will testify. But that was a great achievement, but it sounds sort of a little bit pompous. But the correct answer is, without doubt, the best achievement here was making friendships that 26 years on are stronger than they were even when I was here. That is my great privilege, that I have so many good friends.
Thank you.
Maybe time for one or two more questions. There's one there as well. Taser.
Do you ever have any doubts about what you do with the gambling industry?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought it up. It's a superb question. I can't believe it's taken until now. Look, I chose to address this pretty sensitively during the election, but I'm more than happy to sort of continue the discussion. I've spent, with the exception of some time in Macclesfield, I've spent my entire time in the gambling industry. And one of the other privileges that I have, as well as my day job, is I chair the National Self-Exclusion Scheme for land-based casinos. And that's quite a humbling role, and you see gambling-related harm, and you see people who have got into difficulties. And actually, in direct answer to your question, there are some things that I see in my industry that I absolutely can get on board with when it comes to sort of criticism. One of my personal views, and this doesn't endear me at all to my fellow peers in the industry, is I think there's too much advertising. I think this, if I want to stay up in the night and watch the Ashes and the ball goes to the boundary and there's gambling adverts, I'm not sure how I feel about that. Well, I am sure about how I feel with it, and my industry peers would probably not agree with my view. But I think if you address that, a lot of the attendant concerns, to an extent, get dealt with. But more broadly, look, I think, I'll use gambling as an example, but I think you can think about this sort of more broadly. I think in society we have a choice, right? And we can either regulate things. It's my cousin Amy Siddall, by the way. Her phone's going off. In society, you have a choice. You can either regulate things, but you can put things in the hands of regulated operators, and you can tax it properly, and you can put appropriate regulations in, high levels of regulations in, and you can derive tax benefits from it, and you can secure jobs, and you can properly monitor it. Or you can adopt a prohibition piece, and you can actually put it into the hands of the mob. And one of the discussions that is very live in my industry at the moment is around the correct balance of taxation, around legislation, and around regulation. I think broadly in this country we get it right. There's more we can do on things like advertising. But if we go too far, if that balance tips too far, you will have more of the problems that you actually might suggest that you want to get rid of. So I believe in a sort of very well-regulated industry. I also am not ever going to apologize for the industry in which I work when it is properly regulated and properly legislated. I met my wife through it. I met many of my best friends through it. And for a small number of people, gambling harm can create an awful lot of big problems. I get that. For an awful lot of people in the regulated space, they can derive some pleasure from it. And I've been one of those people, probably from sixth form. 18th birthday.
One more question.
Brilliant question, that, by the way. I enjoyed that.
You said that your brother had a music scholarship.
Yeah.
Did you see your brother as a role model, or were you jealous of him?
Oh. Has he asked you to ask that?
No, it's original
So
question.
he was 3 years older than me academically, 2.5 years older. Was I jealous? I don't think I was ever jealous. I was jealous of him when he went to Cambridge, because he went to like this really posh college at Cambridge, and I think he had 5 rooms in his final year in the Great Court at Trinity College. So I was jealous of that. But no, I mean, you've got to paddle your own canoe, right? You've got to paddle your own canoe. And he went down a very different path to me. I loved spending time on the levels. Once, is middle school library still a thing? Is that still a thing down? No, you're looking at me blankly. There used to be something called middle school library, right? And it looked out onto top level. And I remember once, my best mate Tomo and I, we were in 2A, and I remember Tomo saying, "Willow, look at your brother." And my brother was standing in goal for hockey with a hymn book. Right, and like, I don't know what house he was in, but anyway, it was a house match, and they lost something like 16-1, and he was in goal. And I said, "Look, you're absolutely killing me here. You can't do that. You're embarrassing me." He said, "Well, I just hate sport. He didn't even call it sport, he called it games." So no, I admire him hugely. I love him dearly. He's brilliant. He'll give a great Tillotson lecture one day, with his head on one side.
Thank you very much for some very engaging questions. It's now, I'd like to hand over to Nathan Pearson, captain of school, to give his vote of thanks.
On behalf of all of us here at Bolton School, I'd like to extend our sincere thanks to David for such an authentic and truly heartfelt lecture. Your ability to weave together stories of school days, friends, teachers, triumphs and bruises has created something far richer than a speech. It's been a reminder of the community that Bolton School builds and the threads that tie us all back to our school. And on the theme of not changing, many of us will go home tonight wondering if the teachers still smoke in the staff room and acknowledging that Dr. Holland is the living embodiment of our school motto, as constant today as he was in his cufflinks and collar stiffeners 30 years ago. But beyond the memories and the laughter, what stood out most was your message, one that feels especially important for those of us in Year 13 and Year 12 as we navigate university applications and plans for the future. Your honesty about fear, rejection, wrong turns and unexpected opportunities was reassuring. The idea that life won't always follow the path we expect and that sometimes we're redirected for reasons we only understand years later is something every boy in this hall needed to hear. Your encouragement to stay on your feet and look for the new gaps, rather than standing still or staying in our own lane, is a lesson we'll carry well beyond Bolton School. You also spoke powerfully about the role that Bolton School plays in shaping character. Through our friendships, our teams, our setbacks, our ECAs, and the countless small moments outside the classroom where we learn who we really are. You captured perfectly what Bolton School provides. Not just education, but a platform. Not just skills, but a way of thinking. A way of moving through life with curiosity, courage, integrity, and respect. And perhaps the most reassuring message of all, for everyone in the room, is your reminder that if we go looking for it, we will each find our bus. It won't stop for us, and it won't always look the way we imagined. But if we keep moving, keep learning, and keep our character intact, we will find our place. David, thank you for your honesty, your humour, and your wisdom. Thank you for reminding us that change is nothing to fear, that failure isn't fatal, and that the bruises we collect along the way become part of the character that truly shapes us. Please would everyone join me in offering a very hearty round of applause.
David knows there is like refreshments down in the Leverhulme suite, which is where we're all going to go now, and he's keen to get moving. So it would be my great honour if you come and join us down in there, and we will leave the platform, and if you come and join us. Thank you.